The fluorescent lights of St. Augustine Memorial Hospital flickered at exactly 5:47 in the morning, the same time they did every day, and Sarah Chen was already at her locker in the staff room, lacing up her white sneakers with the kind of precision that made the night shift nurses exchange knowing glances. They'd learned not to comment anymore. Not after the first few weeks when their jokes about her boot camp routine had been met with nothing but a polite smile and eyes that seemed to look right through them into some distant place none of them could see. Sarah had been working in the emergency department for 6 months now, and in that time, she'd become something of an enigma wrapped in scrubs. She arrived exactly 30 minutes before her shift, never a minute early, never a minute late. She stored her lunch in a clear plastic container with military corners, labeled with her last name in block letters. She kept her locker organized with a system that would make a drill sergeant weep with pride. Everything had its place. Everything faced the same direction. Everything was accounted for and inventoried. Her pens were lined up by color. Her stethoscope hung on a specific hook. Even her extra hair ties were arranged in a small plastic bag, sorted by shade. The other nurses found it amusing at first, then slightly annoying, and finally just accepted it as one of Sarah's many quirks. There was also the way she moved through the emergency department. Efficient, economical, never wasting a single motion. When she walked, her steps were measured and purposeful. When she reached for supplies, her hands moved with the kind of muscle memory that spoke of endless repetition. She could start an IV in the dark, intubate a patient in under 60 seconds, and triage a trauma bay with the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen much worse than anything a Saturday night in downtown Portland could throw at her. But it was the little things that really got under people's skin. The way she always positioned herself with her back to the wall. The way her eyes constantly scanned the room, tracking every person, every movement, every potential threat. The way she flinched, just barely, almost imperceptibly, when someone dropped a metal tray or slammed a door too hard. The way she sometimes stood at the ambulance bay doors, staring out at nothing, her jaw clenched, and her hands balled into fists so tight her knuckles went white. Military routine, they called it, usually behind her back, sometimes with affection, sometimes with exasperation, and occasionally with the kind of mockery that comes from not understanding something you've never experienced. Sarah heard them, of course. She heard everything. But she never responded, never explained, never defended herself. She just kept showing up, kept doing her job with a level of competence that bordered on intimidating, and kept her past locked away in that meticulously organized locker, along with everything else she couldn't afford to let out. Dr. Marcus Webb had been the chief of emergency medicine at St. Augustine for 12 years, and in that time, he'd seen hundreds of nurses come and go. Some burned out after a few months. Some transferred to quieter departments. Some discovered they didn't have the stomach for the chaos and carnage that walked through those sliding doors every day. But Sarah Chen was different. She was the best trauma nurse he'd ever worked with, and he had absolutely no idea why she was working in a civilian hospital instead of teaching at some prestigious medical school or running her own emergency department. Her skills were extraordinary. During a mass casualty incident 3 months ago, a tour bus accident on the interstate that had brought in 23 patients in various states of trauma, Sarah had moved through the chaos like a conductor leading an orchestra. She'd triaged with brutal efficiency, prioritizing the salvageable, calling time of death on the unsavable, and coordinating the entire department with a series of clear, calm commands that everyone had simply obeyed without question. Marcus had watched her work with a combination of admiration and curiosity. This wasn't just good nursing. This was combat-level medicine. He'd tried to ask her about it once, casually, over coffee in the break room. "You have military experience?" he'd said, keeping his tone light and conversational. Sarah had looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. "Some," she'd said finally, then taken her coffee and walked away, ending the conversation as definitively as if she'd shut a door in his face. The younger staff members didn't have Marcus's restraint or his sensitivity. They'd nicknamed her Sergeant Chen after she'd snapped at a resident for leaving a trauma bay disorganized. They laughed about her inspection-ready locker. They did impressions of her clipped, economical way of speaking during handoff reports. Sarah tolerated it all with the same patient endurance she brought to everything else. But Marcus noticed the way her shoulders tensed when she heard them, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. It was Dr. Jennifer Ramirez, the newest attending physician, who pushed things too far. Jennifer was brilliant, but abrasive, the kind of doctor who believed her MD gave her license to treat nurses as subordinates rather than colleagues. She'd been at St. Augustine for only 3 weeks when she decided that Sarah's military routine was not just quirky, but actively problematic. "It's obsessive-compulsive," Jennifer announced one afternoon in the staff lounge, loud enough for everyone to hear. "All that arranging and organizing and lining things up, it's pathological. Someone should talk to her about therapy." Sarah was at her locker at the time, changing into her scrubs for the evening shift. Her back was to Jennifer, but Marcus saw her pause, saw her hands still on the locker door. "Or maybe," Jennifer continued, warming to her subject, "it's just attention-seeking behavior. You know, look at me. I was in the military. I'm so disciplined and special. It's exhausting to watch." Marcus opened his mouth to intervene, but Sarah beat him to it. She turned around slowly, her face perfectly composed, and looked at Jennifer with an expression that was somehow both blank and absolutely devastating. "Dr. Ramirez," Sarah said quietly, "with all due respect, you don't know anything about me. I know you make everyone uncomfortable with your rigid routines and your paranoid scanning of every room like you're expecting an ambush," Jennifer shot back. "This is a hospital, not a war zone. Maybe you should consider whether you're really cut out for this environment." The staff lounge went completely silent. Even the ancient coffee maker seemed to stop gurgling. Sarah stood very still, and for just a moment, Marcus saw something flicker across her face, something raw and painful and quickly suppressed. "I'm perfectly capable of doing my job," Sarah said, her voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel underneath. "If you have concerns about my performance, you're welcome to file a formal complaint with HR. Otherwise, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave my personal habits alone." She closed her locker with a controlled click, picked up her bag, and walked out of the lounge without another word. Jennifer looked around the room, clearly expecting support, but found only uncomfortable silence and a few pointed glares. "What?" Jennifer said defensively. "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking." "No," Marcus said coldly. "You're not." He'd been planning to let it go, to chalk it up to Jennifer's lack of social skills and Sarah's understandable privacy, but something about the interaction bothered him. Not Sarah's response. That had been professional and appropriate. It was the look on her face in that brief, unguarded moment. The look of someone who'd been fighting a battle nobody else could see, every single day, and had just been told she was doing it wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon that started out like any other, Marcus found himself in the administrative wing of the hospital, meeting with the facilities manager about the upcoming renovation of the emergency department. They were discussing storage solutions. Of all things, when the facilities manager mentioned that they'd need to reassign some of the staff lockers temporarily during construction. "We'll need to document what's in each locker before we move things," the manager said. "Make sure nothing gets lost or damaged. I'll need access to all of them." Marcus nodded absently, his mind already moving on to the next item on his agenda, when the manager added, "including the ones in the staff lounge. Though honestly, most of them are probably empty or full of junk. Except for that nurse. Chen, is it? I've seen her locker. It's like a museum in there. Everything labeled and organized. Kind of weird, but at least it'll be easy to inventory." Something about that comment stuck with Marcus. A museum. What did Sarah keep in that locker that required museum-level organization? He found himself thinking about it throughout the afternoon, during a consult on a cardiac patient, during a budget meeting that seemed to last for eternity, during the drive home through Portland's perpetual drizzle. A museum. What was she preserving? He told himself it was none of his business. He told himself that Sarah had every right to her privacy, that whatever she kept in her locker was her concern alone. He told himself that he was being intrusive and inappropriate and crossing professional boundaries. He told himself all of these things, and then he found himself in the staff lounge at 6 a.m. 3 days later, ostensibly to refill his coffee mug, watching as Sarah performed her morning ritual. She opened her locker with a key she wore on a chain around her neck, hidden under her scrubs. The locker door swung open to reveal that same meticulous organization. Scrubs folded with hospital corners, supplies arranged by type and frequency of use, personal items in sealed containers. But there was something else, something Marcus hadn't noticed before because he'd never had reason to look so closely. On the inside of the locker door, there were photographs. Not many, just 3. Small, faded, the kind printed on regular paper and laminated for protection. From where Marcus stood, pretending to doctor his coffee, he could just barely make them out. Young people in desert camouflage, arms around each other, squinting into bright sunlight. The same young people around what looked like a field hospital, exhausted but smiling. And one photo that looked different from the others. More formal, more staged. A medal ceremony of some kind, though Marcus couldn't make out the details. Sarah's hand touched the photos gently, just for a moment, her fingers tracing the edges as if confirming they were still there. Then she closed the locker, locked it, and turned to start her shift, her face once again composed and professional. Marcus filed the observation away in the back of his mind and tried to focus on his work. But the image of those photographs stayed with him. The young people in desert camouflage, the field hospital, the ceremony. Pieces of a puzzle he had no right to solve, but couldn't stop thinking about. The night it all came apart started quietly enough. A Friday evening in late October, the emergency department running at its usual organized chaos. Sarah was working triage, her calm presence helping to manage the steady stream of patients. A child with a high fever, an elderly man with chest pain, a college student who'd had too much to drink and needed IV fluids and supervision. Routine cases, the bread and butter of emergency medicine. Marcus was in Trauma Bay 3 with a motorcycle accident victim when he heard the first explosion. Except it wasn't an explosion. It was a car backfiring in the parking lot, a sound he wouldn't have given a second thought to under normal circumstances. But he heard the crash immediately after, the sound of metal hitting tile, and then someone shouting Sarah's name. He ran. The triage area was in chaos. The metal tray Sarah had been holding lay on the floor, medical supplies scattered everywhere. Sarah herself was on her hands and knees in the corner, her back pressed against the wall, her eyes wide and unfocused, her breathing coming in short, sharp gasps. 2 nurses were trying to approach her, trying to help, but Sarah was beyond hearing them. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere Marcus couldn't see but could suddenly, horribly understand. "Everyone back," Marcus said sharply. "Give her space, now." The staff retreated, confused and frightened. Marcus approached slowly, carefully, the way you'd approach a wounded animal. He kept his hands visible, his movements deliberate, his voice low and calm. "Sarah," he said. "Sarah, it's Dr. Webb. Marcus, you're at St. Augustine Hospital in Portland. You're safe. You're in Portland." No response. Sarah's eyes were fixed on something that wasn't there, her body rigid with tension, her hands pressed flat against the wall behind her. "Sarah, I need you to listen to my voice. You're not there anymore. You're here. You're safe. No one is going to hurt you." It took 10 minutes, 10 minutes that felt like hours, before Sarah's breathing began to slow, before her eyes started to focus, before she seemed to hear him. When recognition finally flickered across her face, it was immediately followed by such profound shame and horror that Marcus's heart broke for her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's okay," Marcus said quietly. "It's okay. Can you stand up? Let me help you to the break room." Sarah let him help her to her feet, let him guide her through the emergency department while everyone else pretended very hard not to stare. He got her to the break room, got her seated on the worn couch, got her a cup of water that she held but didn't drink. "I need to call someone for you," Marcus said gently. "A family member? A friend? Someone from the VA?" Sarah shook her head, still not meeting his eyes. "I'm fine. I just need a minute. I'll get back to work." "Sarah, you had a severe panic attack. You're not going back to work tonight." "I'm fine." Her voice was stronger now, defensive. "It was just a car backfiring. It startled me. I overreacted. It won't happen again." Marcus sat down beside her, choosing his words carefully. "How often does it happen? The panic attacks?" Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then, very quietly, "Often enough." "Are you getting help? Therapy? Medication?" "I don't need help. I just need people to stop treating me like I'm broken." "Nobody thinks you're broken, Sarah. But PTSD is a real medical condition, and it's treatable. You don't have to suffer through this alone." Sarah stood up abruptly, setting down the water glass with a hand that trembled slightly. "I appreciate your concern, Dr. Webb, but I'm handling it. I'd like to go home now." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to insist, wanted to do something more, but he could see the walls going up behind her eyes, the defenses reinforcing. "Okay," he said, "but you're taking the rest of the week off. Paid leave, non-negotiable." "That's not necessary." "It is necessary. Doctor's orders. Come back Monday, and we'll talk about support systems and resources. Deal?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once, a sharp military gesture. "Deal." She walked out of the break room with her head high, collected her things from her locker, and left the hospital. Marcus watched her go and felt the weight of all the things he didn't know about her, all the questions he'd never asked, all the pain she carried alone. It was an accident. What happened next? A stupid, random accident that changed everything. The following Tuesday morning, Marcus arrived at the hospital to find the facilities manager and 2 maintenance workers in the staff lounge, looking confused and holding a bolt cutter. The staff lockers were being prepared for the renovation, and one of them, Sarah's locker, had apparently jammed. The key wouldn't turn, the combination lock wouldn't open, and they needed access to inventory the contents before moving it. "We tried calling Nurse Chen," the facilities manager said apologetically. "But her phone goes straight to voicemail. We need to get this locker open today or it's going to delay the whole project. Do we have your authorization to cut the lock?" Marcus hesitated. This felt wrong. This felt like a violation of Sarah's privacy, of her carefully maintained boundaries. But the facilities manager was right. The renovation schedule was tight, and delaying it would cost the hospital thousands of dollars. "Yes," Marcus said finally, "but I'll inventory the contents myself. Leave the locker with me." The maintenance worker made quick work of the lock. The bolt cutter snapped through the metal with a sharp crack, and the locker door swung open to reveal Sarah's meticulously organized world. The facilities manager and maintenance workers left, and Marcus stood alone in the staff lounge, staring at the open locker and feeling like an intruder. He started with the obvious items, the extra scrubs, the medical supplies, the carefully packed lunch. He documented everything on his tablet, professional and methodical. He tried not to look at the photographs on the inside of the locker door, but his eyes kept being drawn back to them. The young people in desert camouflage. They couldn't have been more than 25, most of them younger, their faces still soft with youth, despite the harsh environment around them. Sarah was in the photos, he realized. Younger, thinner, but unmistakably her, with the same serious eyes and the same careful smile. There was text under one of the photos, written in faded marker. "Combat Support Hospital, Kandahar 2011. Charlie Company, 86th CSH, the best team in theater. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. 2011, Kandahar. That was the height of the Afghanistan war, some of the worst fighting, some of the highest casualty rates. Sarah had been there. She'd been a combat medic in one of the most dangerous places on Earth, and she'd never said a word about it. He almost stopped there, almost closed the locker and walked away. But something made him look deeper into the locker's contents. In the very back, tucked behind a spare pair of shoes, was a small wooden box. It was the only item in the locker that didn't fit the utilitarian aesthetic of everything else. Hand-carved, worn smooth with handling, clearly precious. Marcus knew he shouldn't open it. He knew this was crossing a line he could never uncross. But his hands were already lifting the box, already unlatching the simple brass clasp, already opening the lid. Inside, nestled in faded blue velvet, was a medal. Marcus had never served in the military, but he recognized it immediately. Everyone in America knew what a Silver Star looked like, even if they'd never seen one in person. The Silver Star itself, suspended from a ribbon of blue with thin white and red stripes, one of the nation's highest military decorations, awarded for gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States. There was a certificate with it, the paper yellowed and creased from being folded and unfolded many times. Marcus's hands shook as he read it. The Silver Star Medal is awarded to Specialist Sarah M. Chen, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against the enemy while serving as a combat medic with Charlie Company, 86th Combat Support Hospital, in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, on July 14, 2011. The citation was detailed, clinical in its military language, but the story it told was anything but clinical. On July 14, 2011, the Combat Support Hospital had come under direct enemy fire from insurgents who had infiltrated the perimeter. Multiple casualties, overwhelming force. Specialist Chen had remained at her post in the triage area, continuing to treat wounded soldiers even as rounds impacted around her. When the hospital's security forces were overrun, she had taken up a weapon and defended her patients, holding her position for 45 minutes until reinforcements arrived. 3 soldiers owed their lives directly to her actions. 7 more would not have survived without her medical care during the attack. There was more in the box. A Purple Heart, awarded for wounds received in action, a combat medical badge, campaign ribbons, and underneath all of it, a newspaper clipping, brittle with age, from the Army Times. Female medic holds the line in Kandahar hospital attack, the headline read. The accompanying photo showed Sarah, impossibly young, impossibly thin, with a bandage on her head and her arm in a sling, standing at attention as some General Marcus didn't recognize pinned the Silver Star on her uniform. The article quoted her commanding officer. Specialist Chen is the finest soldier I've ever had the privilege to serve with. Her courage under fire was extraordinary, but it's her dedication to her patients, her refusal to abandon them even in the face of overwhelming danger, that truly sets her apart. The Army doesn't give out Silver Stars lightly. She earned this one 10 times over. Marcus closed the box carefully, his hands still shaking. He sat down on the bench in front of the lockers and tried to process what he'd just learned. Sarah Chen, quiet. Private, intensely competent Sarah Chen was a bona fide war hero. She'd faced down enemy combatants. She'd saved lives while under direct fire. She'd been wounded in action and awarded one of the military's highest honors for valor. And she'd never said a word about it. Not when Jennifer Ramirez had mocked her routines. Not when the younger staff members had laughed about her military habits. Not when Marcus himself had asked about her experience. She'd kept it all locked away in this locker, along with everything else she couldn't afford to let out. Marcus thought about the panic attack, about Sarah on her hands and knees in the corner, trapped in some memory he couldn't see. He thought about her constant vigilance, her need to position herself with her back to walls, her organizational habits that weren't obsessive-compulsive but survival mechanisms. He thought about the photographs on the locker door, those young faces in desert camouflage, and wondered how many of them were still alive. He thought about all of this, and he understood with sudden, painful clarity that he had failed her. They had all failed her. They'd seen her symptoms, her struggles, her careful maintenance of control, and they'd treated it like a quirk, like something amusing or annoying or pathological. They'd never once considered that she might be a warrior trying to exist in a world that had no context for what she'd experienced, no framework for understanding what she carried. The staff lounge door opened, and Sarah walked in. She stopped dead when she saw Marcus sitting in front of her open locker, the wooden box still in his hands. For a moment, neither of them moved. Sarah's face went through a rapid succession of expressions: shock, recognition, horror, resignation. Then her jaw set and her shoulders squared, and she walked over to him with the same measured, purposeful stride she brought to everything. "I assume you have questions," she said quietly. Marcus stood up, still holding the box, not sure what to say or how to say it. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. The lock was jammed and we needed to inventory for the renovation, and You found my medals." Her voice was flat, carefully neutral. "Okay, now you know. Can I have them back, please?" Marcus handed her the box and Sarah took it, holding it close to her chest like something precious and fragile. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Marcus asked. "Sarah, you have a silver star. You're a war hero. Why keep that secret?" Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A war hero. That's what you think I am? That's what you are. The citation is right there in black and white. You saved lives under enemy fire. You held the line when everyone else fell back. You were wounded defending your patients. That's the definition of heroism." Sarah was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edges of the wooden box. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you know what happened to Charlie Company after that attack? Do you know what the medal doesn't say?" Marcus shook his head. There were 23 people in that hospital that night. Medical staff, patients, security personnel. When the insurgents broke through the perimeter, we had no backup, no reinforcements, no extraction plan. We were on our own. I did what the citation says. I treated the wounded. I took up a weapon. I held my position. But the reason I held my position wasn't because I was brave or heroic. It was because I couldn't move. I was 23 years old, and I was so terrified that my body literally wouldn't let me run. She looked up at Marcus, and her eyes were dry, but full of something that looked like self-contempt. I stayed at my post because I was frozen with fear. I defended my patients because the alternative was watching them die, and I'd already watched too many people die. When reinforcements finally arrived, I was still standing there, still holding that weapon, still unable to move. They gave me a medal for it. They called it courage, but it wasn't courage, Dr. Webb. It was trauma. "Sarah, 7 people from Charlie Company didn't make it home from Afghanistan," Sarah continued, her voice getting harder, more controlled. 7 people I served with, people I cared about, people whose photos are on the inside of that locker door. 3 of them died in that attack. 2 more died in subsequent operations. 2 took their own lives after we got back to the States. And I'm supposed to be proud of my silver star? I'm supposed to tell people I'm a hero? Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Everyone's sorry. The Army was sorry. The VA is sorry. My therapist is sorry. But sorry doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring back the people I lost. It doesn't make the nightmares stop. It doesn't make me fit into a normal life where the worst emergency is a car accident instead of a mortar attack." She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, visibly forcing herself to calm down. When she opened her eyes again, some of the raw pain had been buried again, locked away in whatever internal compartment she kept it in. "I don't tell people about my service because I don't want to be the war hero nurse. I don't want special treatment. I don't want pity. I don't want people looking at me differently or making assumptions about what I can and can't handle. I just want to do my job, help,